So hello and welcome to the Expat Pod, around the shorter version of the quick fire questions. So if you haven't yet listened to the full podcast with Will talking about his life abroad in Japan, Taiwan and Brazil, then please do go check it out. There'll be a link somewhere around my head for you to go view that, but please do it after you watch this incredible podcast as well. As I said before, this is a shorter version where we'll just go through some quick fire questions about his time living abroad and hopefully give you some inspiration and insight into what it's really like to leave home and experience all the amazing things that the world has to offer. So, Will, my initial question is always, what's your favourite place you've ever lived?
I would say that Japan was the best place that I ever lived, just because at the age I was and because I was single and I don't know, I didn't have too many worries and I was playing a good level of football. It had everything. It had the best food. Great people, respectful. The educational system was fantastic. So all in all, I was able to travel outside Japan to countries around. That was the best.
Wonderful. My next question is, then, what's your favorite international food?
All the cities where I've lived, including Seattle, of course, Tokyo, Taipei, and Taiwan, and now Sao Paulo, Brazil, are foodie cities. But I would say more recently, because I have a son, and my son loves to eat. He's 12 years old. In fact, he's carting around a little bit of a belly. But I took him to a sushi restaurant with a conveyor belt 2 weeks ago. And he just kept saying to me, Dad, this is the best restaurant I've ever been to. This is the best restaurant. He was mixing the 3 kinds of soy sauce on a plate. But Brazil is a fantastic country because there are so many kinds of immigrant groups, and all of them have brought their cuisines. It's a lot like England, I'm sure a lot like the U.S. in that sense. But Sao Paulo is such a fantastic foodie city. Pizza, Japanese, and Brazilian food, barbecue. The feijoada, which has all the different pieces of pork, including the snout, I'm not a big fan. But
And then what's your favorite international tradition?
obviously, I'm partial to the World Cup. I think the World Cup, not only because I like soccer or world football, but I think the sport of football really brings people together around the world. Of course, we have the highest level where there's corruption, there's a ridiculous amount of greed. But I think when you see countries like Brazil, Argentina, of course now countries in South America like Colombia that have a great team with a Liverpudlian named Luis Diaz, you see this kind of common bond that people have. They're mad for football, not in a bad way. Of course there's violence, of course there's hooliganism, but when you go to the World Cup, it's such a fantastic festival. You'll never guess the best game that I saw in the 1998 World Cup. This is just an example. I saw Brazil against Denmark, which was a fantastic match, 3-2, Brazil won, probably one of the best games I've ever seen. But the Cameroon against Chile was a 0-0 tie, but Chile qualified for the knockout round for the first time in the country's history. There was a group of 200 Chileans there who were over the moon, and you never see that, or you don't usually see that anywhere except the World Cup.
That's incredible. Then what's your favorite thing about living abroad?
I think my favorite thing about living abroad is because I'm involved in teaching, but also learning. I think it's communication. It's language. Not to say that I'm necessarily fluent. Of course, I'm fluent. I can make myself understood. I can get what I need. But people laugh. They joke about my accent. A kind of cute American accent after all these years. But I think language in general can be very funny. I don't mean to say that I laugh at my students or my clients, but when you learn something and you're having fun, at the same time, there's a much deeper, I think, psychological connection. So language can touch a lot of spaces and places in your brain that are very difficult to touch otherwise. So communication, that's got to be it.
Completely. Then what's your best homesickness remedy?
I think my best homesickness remedy was going home once a year. I think that when I went home and I visited my mom, I always visited my mom for about 10 days, and I visited my dad for about 2 nights because my mom was a great cook, and she was also a great hostess. Of course, my dad was a good host, but he didn't cook, so we went to the local steak and brew restaurant, which was good enough. And then I wanted to enjoy the forest. I wanted to enjoy the island where my mom lived, the quiet, the calmness, which is different from all the cities where I lived. Tokyo, Taipei, Sao Paulo, the maddening crowd, the excitement, the energy of a big city. But I used to carry a cassette tape. This sends me back a little bit in time of my mother reading some stories. And I used to listen to that when I got really homesick. But homesickness didn't really bother me that much. I had friends. I could talk to my family. I think that was the main thing. Talk to people, and you feel better.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's a very good point, and very, very nice with the cassette. It's something you all need to do. Voice notes are just the modern way of doing that now, I suppose. So my next question is, what's the hardest thing about living abroad?
Great question. Spot on, James. I would say the hardest thing about living abroad is the currency devaluation for me in Brazil. I have to work so incredibly hard to make what amounts to many fewer U.S. dollars. So every time I visit the U.S. with my family, I take a big hit. I remember the first time my son and I went to the United States without my wife. We stopped in at the Miami Starbucks. We spent $25 in an hour, which is not much. But here, you can spend 5 times that. Using the local currency. So besides the currency devaluation, the Brazilian real versus the U.S. dollar, I would say that the transportation in all the places that I've been. Japan, I took the train every day, completely crowded like sardines. Although the Japanese are extremely polite, it got tiresome after 6 years. Taiwan, surviving on a motor scooter was extremely hard, in typhoons, in floods. And then finally in Brazil, the traffic is horrendous. The cars, one time I came to an intersection and people blocked 5 ways. There was gridlock. I've never seen that anywhere else in the world. We couldn't get out. We couldn't extricate ourselves. But also Brazil is a great country for red tape. So be ready for some bureaucracy when you come here.
What's the best phrase you've learned while living abroad?
Once again, I should defer to my sister because she likes one chapter that I included in my book. My sister Susan told me the chapter about Ronaldinho, the Southern man, Gaúcho, one of the famous players in the recent history of Brazil. He used to bring people so alegria. What that means in Brazilian Portuguese is only happiness, right? When you watched him play, he was smiling, he was joyful, he was fun. But to tell you the truth, that's a greeting on the street. When people see each other, they know each other casually, they say, "Hey, only happiness?" And the other guy responds, "That's right, only happiness." So the Brazilians are happy people, even though they struggle, they suffer. But Ronaldinho also said one thing, which was his definition of saudade, which is like missing or longing, the translation in English. But I remember I had a Portuguese class very quickly, and the teacher told me, you don't have saudade in English. You don't have missing or longing. Of course we do. I checked my dictionary. He said, no, because saudade means a Brazilian person missing his Brazilian family or missing Brazilian rice and beans. So it's all your perception.
That's a good one, sure. What's the best way of making new friends?
I think probably Brazil is the best example because when I came here, obviously I had someone to take care of me at first, but after we split up, I was on my own. But the very first thing I did was to go learn Portuguese for strangers, which is the literal translation of Português para estrangeiros, for foreigners. And that's where I met a bunch of great people. They were learning English through theater, English through music. So classes, I think, is one of the best ways. Taking a class. I also took a ceramics class after I learned Portuguese a little bit, and I had a great time. Every Saturday morning, I went there for a couple hours. It was a very nice way to spend a Saturday morning. Relaxing, drinking tea, making ceramics, talking, taking a class.
That's incredible. It's a bit like in Sweden, you have Swedish for immigrants. It's quite a direct, this is what it says on the tin, I suppose. And then what's the best thing to do in your new city?
I think I told you this before we started recording, but when I first came to Sao Paulo, I went to Sao Paulo's biggest park, which is called Ibirapuera Park. But I went on a Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock when it was most crowded, and there were so many people. It was impossible to experience and enjoy the trees, the green. But later I went there at night, and it just magically transformed into a different world. I went there jogging one night at 8 p.m. It stays open until 10. Of course, maybe there are a few crazy people walking around. It's a huge park with a lot of forest. And at night, I saw what is called a quachi, like a rodent animal. I saw monkeys. So in this city park where I saw thousands of people, I also saw animals at night, wild animals. So it was a completely different situation. And people play volleyball here. They play soccer here under the lights until 10 p.m., which is very nice.
That's such a cool place to go. And then my last question, what's your best life hack?
Yeah, I was thinking a lot about that because I played a lot of soccer or football. As you know, I've been hacked in so many different places by so many different opponents, but I've hacked right back. But if you're talking about a hack in terms of a tool, I would say that it's useful to know about the financial system a little bit when you travel, to understand a little bit more about currency exchange, the kind of app you can use, the kind of card you can use. There's a new bank called Nomad, for example. But I remember once when I went to Bali in Indonesia, and I changed, in those days, like the early 2000s, we had traveler's checks. And I changed a 100 US dollar traveler's check. The guy gave me a bag of money, rupiah. So I was like counting, 20,000 rupiah. And then I went to dinner and I spent, I don't know, 10,000. And so anyway, it was just interesting. I wasn't really prepared for that. Yeah.
That's incredible. And thank you for your time and generosity with your incredible stories. And, I really hope you do the rest of your traveling life and experiences throughout the future. And yeah, I've been looking forward to reading that book when I get my hands on it, and sharing it with many people who will enjoy it too. As always, if you have enjoyed the podcast, if you wish to.
Very good, thanks, Jason. I love your podcast.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, and as always, if you have enjoyed it, please share it with your friends and family, and see you next time for the Expat Pod.